This video is going to be about maintenance and probably some information that you may find helpful, useful. First off, this is one of the earlier Thunderbirds. This is one of my prototypes, and I've been flying it quite a bit. And in fact, it's so early that the front mount, wing mount, was actually slotted it because I was adjusting the location of the wing. And so I'm going to change this out, and I thought I should back up and do a video on this because there's a couple of things that are really important. And what I've already done here is I've removed this piece, and what I used to remove the piece was just some CA debonder, and the debonder works really well. The only thing you need to do is take your part that has been CA'd, and of course I grab a bag and I keep my debonder in a bag, and I also keep the lid on the bottle. And of course I have the applicator here, so what I do is I swap it out, and I only use a few drops. All you want to do is wet the joint. So in this case, if I were going to, and I don't need to take this one off, but if I were going to take this one off, then what I would do is take my debonder and just put about 2 drops on the top of this and let it kind of wick around, and then put a drop or 2 on this side and let it wick around. And I would not let the CA or the debonder run anywhere. I would keep it right on the CA or right on the glue joint, and then I would just start wiggling the part. And what it does is it actually softens the CA, and this works amazingly well. As you can see, I was able to pull this out literally with my hand, and of course it went up in the front. Now I'm going to replace this piece with a new one, and of course it won't have the slots in it. None of the kits ever shipped with slots because they weren't necessary. So, but I thought I would share that tip with you about the debonder, keeping the debonder in a plastic bag, sealed of course, and then keeping the original top on the debonder and keeping that sealed. Now this bottle of debonder is about gone, but this has lasted me a couple of years, and I mean, I do every now and then will take something apart, but it's not a regular thing, and that's why I use the plastic bag to prolong the life of my debonder, because it will evaporate. The next thing is yesterday, if you watched the 2 videos, and I did 2 parts because you know, we get a lot of flying in, and I don't video every flight, but the flights that I do video, I've gotten to the point now I'm pretty well convinced that the model flies really well, so there's really nothing that I need to demonstrate in the videos. So I've started cutting my videos. Now normally I don't like to cut my videos because I don't want people to think I'm just showing you the good parts. You know, you can see the whole videos, but they get kind of boring because it's the same thing over and over. But I've been working on the glide locks, and I do have a glide lock that's in addition to the 2 glide locks that actually come with the model. It just offers a little better glide. I mean, you're only going to get so much glide out of it, but I have improved the glide a bit by using a different notch on a glide lock. Okay, so let's get on to what I'm talking about today, or what I'm going to show you, and that is yesterday with this model. This is the one that actually had the tail servo fail on me right after launch. I mean, as soon as I launched, all of a sudden it started going to the right, and then I wanted to go back left, and whenever I went left, the tail went all the way to the left, and then it stayed there. Rudder.
Oh. Yow.
And of course, whenever I went right, it went all the way to the right. And if you look at the video, you can see that actually happening. So obviously the model stalled. I guess my point with that video there is that anytime you have an issue, first stop flapping. And if you're low to the ground, you should stop flapping. Now, I did not stop flapping. As you could see, I actually flapped it all the way down. And of course, it was in a stall situation, so it was not climbing. And if it's not climbing, don't be flapping, because all you're going to do is drive it into the ground faster. Now, fortunately, I didn't land on pavement. Our runway is a material with sand underneath it, basically. So, I mean, this is the model that hit the ground and there was no damage. However, I did, and within 2 or 3 flights of that one, I had the high-speed gear strip. Okay, and I've noticed a common issue with this high-speed gear stripping. And what is happening is, anytime I've stripped the high-speed gear, I've also taken a look at the wire pinion, and I've found that the wire pinion is actually wore to the point that the high-speed gear is able to move back away from the pinion enough to start this gear failing. In other words, knocking a few teeth off of it. And then because that starts happening, it literally will clear the teeth off of the gear almost all the way around. And you can see here, there's only teeth left on this gear from about right here to right here. The rest of the way, all the way around this gear, there are no teeth on it. So you can see there, it's going a good ways around before you find teeth again. And again, here the teeth are, and there the teeth are, and then there's no teeth all the way around to there. So another thing, and this is the common denominator here, shall we say, this wire pinion is actually wore to the point where it needs to be replaced as well. And the way we can tell that is if we just take and move the high-speed gear. You see the wire pinion floating in there? Okay, that is a sign that the wire pinion has wore down in the area where the bearing is. Now, obviously, the wire pinion is the only thing going through the bearing race. So you are going to get some wear on that because of the pressure on this particular gear. And so I'm noticing that if I pay attention to this, I can probably eliminate this high-speed gear from being damaged. The third failure that I had yesterday involved this bolt here. This bolt is what connects the ball link to the shoulder. And it was pretty evident that this bolt failed in that it sheared off. And the reason that I say it sheared off is because if we look here close, you can see how much thread I have sticking past the end of the bolt. And once the bolt gets loose, works loose, well, obviously the wings are not going to flap correctly, and therefore the model's going to want to turn in the direction of the failing bolt. And in my case, whenever it failed, it didn't really want to turn in either direction. It flew perfectly fine until it did fail, and then once it failed, all it wanted to do was go in a circle. There's the ball link and the bolt and the spacer, and all is missing off of one side. The reason that I believe that this bolt sheared is because the bolt would work loose, and of course when you have a problem you notice it right away. You stop flapping, or at least slow your flap rate to figure out what the problem is, whether you're going to do more damage trying to continue flapping or if you should just stop flapping and let it land. In most cases you should just stop flapping and let it land. However, if you do advance the power and the wings start flapping, then chances are you have some other type of failure, and you're not going to do more damage by trying to flap and get the model in a position where it's safe to land. This is also a good reason why you should never fly over trees, obstacles, buildings, parking lots with cars in them or people, because you can have a failure at any time. So, but again, going back, the reason I think the bolt failed is because whenever it landed, there was no bolt, there was no spacer, there was no washers, there was no nut, there was no nothing. The whole bolt was gone. And I think the only way that could happen is if the bolt actually sheared or broke. Maybe I torqued it too tight, I don't know, but either way, I have had that issue with this bolt now. And so, as a rule, whenever I pre-flight, I do check the bolts. Specifically, I check the flex plate bolt, but yesterday I did not check this bolt here, and of course that's the one that failed. Here's some of the items I make sure I have with me at the field whenever I go flying, just because I fly a lot and enjoy flying. Now I do take a couple of birds, so if one of them has a problem and I can't fix it, well, I just start flying the other one. But for the most part, there's only a couple of things that I really need to get a bird back in the air. Obviously, I'm going to need some CA or some kicker if I have issues with the tail. Usually the issue you have with the tail is going to be where the glue joint's going to fail on the tail itself. And that's not an uncommon thing, especially if you fly in high winds. It's not something that's happened a lot, but it has happened. I think in probably close to a year now that I've been flying, I've had 3 times where I've had to glue back the tail. And to do it, all you do is take an X-Acto blade and carefully pop off the CA, just anything that's loose and anything that's built up. If you can take it off, go ahead and pop it off. Don't use the debonder in this area, just because I've not found a need to do so. The glue joint's already broke, so you can just clean up the area with the X-Acto blade, and then kind of scuff up the area with your X-Acto blade by scraping it. Also, your carbon rod, it's going to be one of the 2 rods. Whatever rod has failed you, just scrape on it just a little bit. You don't want to change the size of it, you just want to rough it up so the CA will stick to it. And then of course just rebuild it. Build up the CA again over the area, and then hit it with some kicker. Do it very lightly, and you should be in good shape there. As far as the rest of the parts, I always take a set of flex plates with me that are ready to mount. You could also use the existing flex plate if you have a little time. You can pop out if you have a flex plate that fails, or even a ball link that fails. You pop out the ball, undo the bolt, take a new ball link and place it back on the flex plate, put the bolt in place, insert your steel ball, and now you have, for all intents and purposes, a flex plate ready to be reinstalled on your model. It doesn't really matter which way you do it. I mean, these are cheap, they're easy to make a field repair with. So the biggest problem you have is taking the ball out. But what I do is I take a pair of dikes and cut the plastic, because it's already wore. So it's not an issue. And then throw this part away, because if you take something off of your model, go ahead and throw it away. Don't throw it in your box thinking that you're going to get some life out of it later, because at some point you may need it. And if you have it in your box, you won't know if it's a new one or one that you wore out. And so it's just easier just to throw them away. And like I say, I just cut them, because in that way I can't use them, and because they're really inexpensive. The other thing is the rod. I mean, I'll have a couple of rods. Now, one other thing I do is I do take a kit with me to the field. So if I need a part, and it's not one of these, I can actually rob it from the kit, and then whenever I get home, I get my little box of parts out, and then I replace the part into the kit, and that way I always have a kit. The kit's not for sale at the field. The kit's so that I have every part that is on the model, and that way I can get back in the air. But since I've started carrying more than one model to the field, that's not even gotten to be an issue anymore. The other thing is the high-speed gear and wire pinion with the locking ring. This is ready to install. If I had a gear failure, all I would do is take out the gear that's in the model, grab the spring washer, put the spring washer on, reinstall this in the gearbox, put the gearbox back together, and I'm ready to fly again. The other thing is the larger gears. If for by chance I do lose a larger gear and I wind up needing to replace it, I have a gear set, a complete gear set with me, so I can basically pull if I have to replace the main gear set, all you do is remove the flex plates, remove one of the Phillips screws, push out the axle off of the gear, and then pull both these gears off, take the new gear set, put in place, time the gear. Remember, there's marks on the gears, and these marks must be in line with the high-speed pinion. In other words, this mark needs to be in the same tooth on this side. If you flip this around, you keep that, it should be in the same tooth like it is there. So if you have it like this on one side and then you have it like that on the other side, that is out of time. That will not work. It needs to be in there like that. So that tooth is in that gear, and if we turn this around, then that tooth is in that gear, and that's fine. So then you can go ahead and push these together, put the screw back in it, put on your flex plates, and you're ready to go again. Everything else is just extra bolts. For instance, here just yesterday I had a failure of this bolt, so this bolt was not in, so therefore I lost the two washers, larger washers, the single smaller washer, and the bushing. I lost all that. Well, I have a couple of them in my little bag of goodies, so that if I lose one, not a problem. I have a replacement. Also, these bolts here, this is a complete set. It is the bolt, the spacer, and then the washer and the G10 spacers, and all of this goes on the flex plate, and it's to mount the flex plate to the gear set. So that's what this set of hardware here does. So, and I have everything on this bolt. I can pick up a bolt and look at it, look at what's on it, and know where it goes. And like I say, this is all the hardware and stuff to connect the flex plate to the main gear. This is all the hardware needed to connect the top of the flex plate to the upper shoulder. So these are the main bolts. I have a couple of nuts, 632 screws in case one of these screws breaks off or shears or comes loose and I lose it. I have a couple of screws. Nuts, same thing, you know. The other screws, the longer screws, also I have a couple of bearings. You know, if you lose a bearing and you just need to pop it out, well, generally you can do that with a little bit of debonder and press the bearing out. But sometimes, you know, check the bearing first, because the CA may not stick well to the bearing, so you could actually press the bearing back out. All the CA really does is just harden the G10 around the bearing. And for the simple fact that a lot of bearings, you know, they do have a little bit of oil, they have a light oil coating, so the CA won't stick to them real well. So check and make sure that you might be able to just press that bearing out. And of course, if you press a new bearing in, you don't have to re-CA it, because you've got the CA on there already. And there's a good chance that you won't even need to put CA on a bearing whenever you reinstall it. But like on the flex plate, I would make sure that bearing is good and secure. All the other bearings are pretty much held in place just by the way the model goes together. And if you have any questions, you can send me an email or give me a phone call. I'll be glad to help you if I can. Thank you for your time, and enjoy the hobby.